Thank you. Moving to the work session, item 8, redevelopment resolution. At our last meeting, as you may recall, we had JMF Properties who made a presentation, and subsequent to that presentation, we had our redevelopment council for the borough, Mr. Lair. As part of that discussion, and Mr. Lair brought us through the issues with respect to the redevelopment process and how it moves between here and the planning board. And in the interim, there became an issue about there apparently is more than one type of redevelopment process. And I was just asking Mr. Laird if he would please address the council and we could revisit that discussion from last time. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, good evening, Council President, good evening, members of the council, Dan, members of the professional staff, Jeff Lehrer from the law firm of Deeper and Cisco Bateman. The mayor's right. There was an issue that we left somewhat, and I assume there's a responsibility somewhat for that because I had heard during the discussion from Mr. Forgione that he had control at least of most of the properties of the 14 parcels, but it appears that may not be the case. There may be 3 or 4 that he doesn't have control over. The law in New Jersey changed a few years ago. And I had just assumed when I left the chambers that this was going to be what's called a non-condemnation redevelopment designation. The law changed in New Jersey a couple of years ago, and the statute, the redevelopment statute, now requires that when you refer the matter to the planning board, that you designate it as either a non-condemnation redevelopment analysis or a condemnation analysis. What that means is that the planning board still conducts the same study to determine whether it meets the criteria, but you initially determine whether it's going to be non-condemnation or condemnation. And for the most part, I had just assumed that, as I said, that was going to be non-condemnation based upon what I had heard. I then sent the resolution, the designation, the non-condemnation resolution to Mr. Forgione. At his request, he asked if he could see a copy of it. I sent it to him, and he called me and said, look, I may not be able to get control over some of these properties. I may, but I may not. Let me just tell you, it's really not my decision, obviously. It's a council decision whether they want to make it condemnation or non-condemnation, but my job is really to just tell you what the law is and for you to decide whether you want to proceed on either basis. If a condemnation designation or request is made from the onset, the council, if they elect to adopt a resolution authorizing the use of condemnation, the planning board notice of the hearing to the affected property owners has to specifically indicate that the use of eminent domain may be possible. If the planning board, after its hearing, makes a determination that the property meets one or more of the criteria for designation as an area in need of redevelopment, and they send that resolution back to the governing body, the governing body, when it adopts its resolution, if it adopts its resolution, then formally designating the property as an area in need of redevelopment, has an additional burden. And they have to then notify the property owners in the affected area that condemnation may be used to acquire some or all of the parcels of land. And it also triggers a 45-day time clock where the property owners that may be affected can challenge the designation. So you really can't, the borough can't take any action to acquire lands for a period of 45 days from the date that they receive that notice. So it's really an intentional delay mechanism that's included in the statute if you decide to use condemnation. I'm not suggesting that you do, but if you do pursue that route, then condemnation is governed by a completely separate statute. You then have to, if you proceed with condemnation, Obviously, the costs of all of that would be borne by the developer. However, you have to enter into good bona fide negotiations, you have to order the appraisals. There is a waiting period of at least 14 days before a property owner, you can take any action once you send them the appraisal. So that process can go on, and I can talk to you about that process if you want to know about how that process works. Obviously, there are issues that are political in nature dealing with the whole concept of condemnation. That's obviously not my issue, but I want to bring the legal issues to your attention because condemnation carries with it certain legal obligations as well.
Any questions? Thank you.
All right, Mayor, as you're aware that I have provided you with a resolution.
There are, when I was aware that there were two, for lack of a better word, flavors of redevelopment, I asked that Mr. Lair send that to our clerk, and so that there are two versions of that, one with and one without eminent domain. And so I believe it was sent to each of you, but one of the things that prompted this discussion was the issue of the properties in question. And when Mr. Forgione was here, he said that he was a contract purchaser. And again, I was more focused on the size, the number of units, the price point of the units, and so forth. And so, as I became aware of this, I not only asked you to do it in 2 different times, and I asked that we put this back up on the agenda again, because I think this is different than was everyone's understanding when they voted previously. And then in order to complete, in my judgment, to complete the fact analysis, what I did is I wrote, if you recall, we had a submission that was one rather large page by, I can't remember his first name, but it was McDonough was the planner.
John McDonough.
John McDonough. And then there was a couple of pictures or drawings or sketches or whatnot. So I wrote to Mr. McDonough, and I said, look, I said, this issue has come up, and I'm very much interested in what is the percent of the acreage that you have under contract. Make a long story short, he didn't get back to me. So I made a call to JMF Properties, and they're in Whippany, New Jersey, and I asked them to please send an email, which I believe was distributed to all of you, and I'd like to read the email because I wanted to understand the nature of the request. Are we talking about, 1% of the land is under contract, or are we talking about 30%, 60%, and so forth? So, and I'll read this to you. It's from Mr. Forgione, who is a principal within JMF Properties, which I guess is his name. And it's regarding Block 81 redevelopment, and I received this yesterday at 11:42, and I believe all of you have this. And it says, Mayor, pursuant to our conversation, please accept the following information. The total number of lots in Block 81 is 14, and we have 11 under control. The total land area is 153,060 square feet. In common vernacular, I would just call that 3.3 acres. And it is important to note that the total percentage of land under contract or has a letter of intent executed by the owners is 92%. So at this juncture, we're talking about 8% of the property is not under contract. And then he further writes, it is important to note that the 3 lots we do not control are not owner occupied. They are rented as residential units. Please let me know if there's any additional information. Thank you very much, JMF Properties. And because I think there is an issue of balance relative to this, and that's why I really wanted to bring it up again, is that I think we all have a concern about the power of government, but I like to reflect upon having a balance. And in essence, the way that I, for lack of a better word, politically look at this is this seems to be an important opportunity in town, that if we were looking to go out and to essentially seek the opportunity of eminent domain over the entire parcel, the 3.3 acres, that would be one set of facts. If we, this is the case, are looking at 8% of the total property not under contract, so now we have three parties in the room. We have the developer who obviously wants to have 100%. We have the town, provided that this is good for the town, who would be interested, have an interest of it going ahead. And then we have the three property owners who represent 8% of the property. And so, to me, whenever you're making a judgment, the underlying facts are important because there are tremendous philosophical issues, you could call them political, I call them philosophical issues, with respect to this subject. And I just wanted to alert the council and now the public to the activities that have gone on since the last meeting, because I really wanted to essentially restart the process and to essentially make sure that if we're going to go down this redevelopment path, we choose the right path from the beginning, because as I said to my kids, if you start off wrong, you'll never end up right. And so that's why in the interim, I did get the information. I did ask for the two versions of the resolution, and I did want to bring this back out into the public forum for both council as well as audience. So with that, I'll be quiet. Any comment or discussion?
What's the perspective on acquiring the three properties? Is that a possibility?
Oh, I think it's a probability. See, the way this is just me, the way I look at this is that there's an infamous house in Atlantic City which is stuck inside of or part of a casino. And I remember that as a young kid when they were developing that, and that's really the situation that we're trying to eliminate. Basically, I think it's the intention of all parties to be fair. And so, in essence, my expectation is that we are truly only doing this as a last resort if in fact the planning board and then subsequently the council decides that this is something that is in the town's interest. And so, I think because of the three parties, which is the developer and the property owners who are principals, and then as we go through this process and we come to a conclusion with the advice of the planning board and their people, that we don't want to essentially come to a conclusion and say, no, wait a minute, 8% of the property owners chose not to go ahead, so the town is denied the opportunity to proceed. So I think the market is the market is the market, and I think reasonable people will come to reasonable conclusions. And in my judgment, in the event that they don't, I think that utilization of eminent domain is a opportunity for the town to essentially exercise its priorities as to whether or not at that point in time it's in its interest, based upon the work that goes up to that date, is that this is the development of import, and the developer and the three property owners have failed, and we have the opportunity to move ahead. Obviously, the preferable option is that we go through the process, and if this is good for the town, that the property owners would all get, and the applicant would have gotten together. And really what this does, in my personal judgment, is to protect the interests of the town, because basically, I think there is a fair value for that property, and I think there is a great opportunity, at least as I see it sitting in this chair today, for redevelopment of the property that frankly I used to live a stone's throw away. And it hasn't looked much different than it did 35 years ago, other than Rigoletti's closed down. But I think what this does, it preserves for us the opportunity, if the private marketplace fails, and the public interest, as we define it at that point in time, based upon everything we hear today, says that this is good for the town, it then gives us the ability to move forward, and only in that circumstance. And that's why, in the interim, are the reasons that I wanted to get this out to you. I need it, and that's the reason I wanted this in writing, because I don't like hearsay, I got this, I got that. Because I also, as you said, misunderstood, or probably more appropriately, didn't perceptively question. But I thought, in order to make a fair discussion with you, as well as the audience, is that those facts need to be brought forth, as well as the context that I just discussed.
Mayor, just one other thing, just for your information, that if you go through the condemnation route, you don't have, obviously, you don't have to use it.
Of course.
But if you go the other route, and non-condemnation, and then you go through the process, if you decide that you need to go through the condemnation process, you have to start all over. It's the restart button all over again. So I just want you to understand that
That's a good
is a
point.
factor.
Thank you. Okay. Any, yes, sir.
So Mayor, just, Resolution 2016-1-32 was the resolution adopted at the last meeting referring the matter to the planning board for study. So I think just procedurally, so it's clean, if the council is inclined to adopt it would be an amending resolution, a resolution amending Resolution 2016-1.
I was gonna ask you that, but I didn't know what everyone's persuasion was.
Right, so I'm just putting that out there, so however the council wants to go, that's how it should occur.
Fine. So, does anyone wanna make a motion and then we can have discussion? Or, that's the way we normally do it, but we'll have a motion, second, and discussion, or how do you wanna go?
I'll make the motion to discuss it.
Okay,
Is that what it-
why don't we just discuss it?
Yeah.
Okay, how's everybody feel?
For me, the numbers he presented, that would be tax revenue generated, is enough reason to pursue this route, the condemnation route, but not necessarily having to use it. That's how I feel about it. I think that's pretty simple.
I agree, the project should go forward. It's a blighted area, it needs to be improved.
I agree too. Should go forward with that.
Okay. Could I have a motion amending the resolution to include the right of condemnation or eminent domain?
Yep.
Maybe the council is,
That's fine.
all right. Have a motion for that, please?
I'll make the motion.
Councilwoman Kara, a second, please?
I'll second.
And this would just be resolution, so this would now be titled Resolution 2016-2-44, is that correct?
Yeah.
-44, a resolution amending Resolution 2016-1-32 to include the referral to the planning board for redevelopment purposes, a redevelopment study to include condemnation. That's the motion in the second.
Roll call, please?
Councilman Bray?
Yes.
Council President Kara?
Yes.
Councilwoman Danilo?
Abstain?
Councilman Fooey?
Yes.
Councilman Giraldi?
Yes.
Councilman Sebelia?
No.
Okay, let's hope the private marketplace works.
Thank you, Mayor.
Motion carries, thank you.